Alright folks, it occurred to me that it would probably be a good idea for me to explain to you how to get your patio garden ready for you to go on vacation. So what I'll go over is a few tips on how to prepare for that. First thing I did was I cut down everything that could bolt. So here's one item here, that would be my basil. That's an item that will bolt quickly if I let it get out of control. So I cut down all the basil down to the first set of leaves. Next thing I did, I cut down all the plants that could get really huge, like the Swiss chard here. That's another plant that can pretty much grow and grow and grow and get out of control. So there's another example there, Swiss chard. I cut it down to the first two leaves. There's the Swiss chard, and then also the kale. So what I do is I take all the leaves from that. I had a huge pile of leaves of my Swiss chard and kale, and I chopped it up and I blanched it and I froze it. And you want to blanch these vegetables before you freeze them because they have bacteria in them that could actually break down the nutrients. Sorry, there's a plane overhead here. They have bacteria that could break down the nutrients as the vegetable is frozen, and so you want to blanch them before you freeze them. And you can look up online what's the blanching process, but it's basically dunking it in boiling water and then quenching it in ice right away. Alright, so the next thing I did was I used my sprayer here and I sprayed all my cucumber plants with neem oil. And that's to combat any anthracnose that could flare up. Now, anthracnose is I have a video on it, but it's basically a fungal virus or a fungal infection that can be acquired by your zucchini plants and your, basically your cucurbits, so your cucumber plants and your zucchini plants and any squash plants that you may have. Those can all be very susceptible to anthracnose, so you want to spray those before you go. The next thing you want to do is you want to fertilize everything. So I heavily fertilized all the plants. I'm going to be gone for a week and a half. Typically you fertilize every 2 weeks, every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the size of the plant and the feeding frequency necessary. So I fertilized everything. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to spray down and get rid of any sort of insects that it might be have an infestation flare up. So for example, a good example would be aphids. Aphids or Japanese beetles for me. Those are my two most worst enemies at this time. So the Japanese beetles, I usually set up a trap away from the garden, and then for the aphids I usually just spray them with soap water. I have a separate video showing you how I do that as well. Okay, and then the last and final thing that I recommend, cut any large fruit. And actually that's not the last thing. That would be the second to the last thing. The second to the last thing is cut any large fruit from any of your fruiting plants, because if it's a cut and come type, like for example cucumber plants here, so today I'm going to be cutting off any remaining cucumbers that are growing. I've got a few here. This is my all-star plant here that has tons of cucumbers growing at all times. See what's going on in here. So there's a few more. I'm going to cut all these babies, put them in the fridge. Cucumbers last a while in the fridge. And also I'm going to cut any zucchini that are growing. Thought we had a few over here, but we for sure have a few downstairs. So I'm going to cut any of those because if any of your fruiting plants grow huge fruit, especially these types, they will stop producing. They'll basically produce seeds through the huge fruit, and then they'll stop producing fruit. So when you come back, you'll have a non-viable plant at that point. So then the last thing that I recommend is set up a way to ensure that your plants will get watered. Here I have just a sprinkler that I set up, and this sprinkler covers 3,600 square feet. I notified my neighbors to let them know about the sprinkler, just to ensure that they wouldn't be fearful that something had broken or busted and that it was just leaking all over the place. But I set up this sprinkler head because I just didn't want to bother any friends or family members to come over here. This deck requires daily watering, sometimes twice a day. So I set this sprinkler up on a timer, and I basically test it out before going, just to ensure that it's covering the entire area and that every plant is getting watered properly. So I'd recommend testing it out for about a week in advance, just so that you have time to adjust if necessary. The watering frequency or the duration of the watering schedule. So that would be it. Those are my tips for you on how to prepare your patio garden or your deck garden, your small container garden for a brief or long vacation. And that's all. So please let me know in your comments below any questions that you may have and what you think. All right, bye, my avid gardening enthusiasts.